This year I harvested about 200 to 300 heads of garlic, and this is all I have left after just 4 months. So I plan on increasing my production many times fold to 600 to 800 cloves of garlic that I will be planting in the garden this fall. So this video, I want to talk about everything you need to know about buying your garlic, how much space you need, the different varieties, and everything in between to help you make the best choice for planting garlic in your garden. A lot of times I do my garlic planting video and then you guys will comment saying, where was this a month or two ago when I actually had the time to order this before everything sold out? So I'm going to talk about where I'm planning on putting all the garlic that I'm growing this year and everything you need to know about choosing it, storing it, planting it, and all that sort of stuff before you actually get it in the ground. Before we get into where I'm placing it, I want to break down everything you kind of need to know at the beginning about the different garlic types. Now there are a lot of different varieties out there. The most basic classification is soft neck and hard neck. Soft neck garlic, in principle, in general, will do best in just about any climate where it doesn't get too cold. So it is something that if you live in a colder zone, you might want to consider planting it in the spring. If you live somewhere like San Diego, you could plant it now, you could plant it in the springtime, it doesn't really matter. It just won't tolerate a heavy freeze. Now, in contrast, there's hard neck garlic, which can totally handle any amount of freezes if planted at the right time. As long as it's planted before the first frost. I've even seen people plant it after the first frost because it goes into the ground, which helps insulate it and keep it alive regardless of how cold it is outside. So hardneck garlics can go down to very, very low zones. I think I haven't looked it up exactly, but I know for a fact that it can handle zone 4. I'm sure it can handle down to zone 2 just fine. So the contrast to that though is that hardneck garlic needs the cold. It actually wants the cold in order to produce those big bulbs, those big juicy cloves that we're after. Hardneck garlic in general, I think tastes a little bit stronger, has a little bit more going on, more complex, whereas softneck garlic is quite delicious, but it's just not as complex of a flavor. Now there is another thing here, which is that softneck garlic will store for a longer time than hardneck garlic. I believe softneck can store upwards of 9 months, whereas hardneck has an upper limit of 6 months. So all those things to say, they are all great, delicious types of garlic, and within those categories, there's even more. There's porcelain, there's rambicol. They just break down into very crazy varieties. But the only thing that I really want you guys to take away is softneck garlic is great for warmer climates. It's great for pretty much anywhere, as long as you don't plant it where it freezes. And then hardneck garlic can survive everywhere, but it won't thrive and produce the biggest bulb somewhere like San Diego, zone 9+, where it doesn't get cold enough. So there is a way to grow it, and I actually do preferably grow the hardneck garlic because I am all about the flavor, and I love that deep, pungent flavor of these hardneck garlics. So what can you do to convince your garlic that winter is real and that it is not living in San Diego? Well, what you could do is take your garlic, and you can put it in a brown paper bag and then put this in the refrigerator, and then that will act as winter time. So you want to place your garlic in the fridge for about 2 to 4 weeks, as long as you can really. 4 weeks is probably the upper limit where you're going to start having some other sorts of weird issues with storing your garlic in the fridge, maybe. But I believe in general, actually, you can store garlic in the fridge for a very long time, as long as you don't store it in a plastic bag. You put it in a paper bag, vegetable crisper drawer preferably. That will give it the longest lifespan. So what I am going to be doing is storing all of this hardneck garlic, because I think I literally only ordered hardneck garlics, or actually maybe 1 or 2 soft necks in here. But the next thing I wanted to mention is how much garlic you're actually getting. Now this depends on the different varieties. Something like Music, which is one of my favorites, has very large cloves. I think it has an average of 6 cloves per head of garlic. So if I order 6 heads of garlic, I'm only going to be able to plant 36 total plants because there are 6 large cloves in that. That is a blessing and a curse because you get less garlic per pound or per head when you purchase it. But when you go to use it in the kitchen, you now have these big, juicy, fat cloves that are very easy to process, and it's also a very flavorful variety. Then you have things like soft necks, which can have upwards of 20, 24 individual cloves. They are smaller in general. So that is the sort of trade-off. You get more bang for your buck up front, but you're now going to have to do a lot more work to process that garlic. So it's kind of an ebb and flow of what is worth it. What do you actually want out of your garlic? For me, I am favoring flavor and I'm favoring the ease of using it in the kitchen. So I'd much rather have bigger cloves than a bunch of really teeny cloves. So when you look to purchase your garlic, you want to make sure that you understand how much you're getting. Don't be surprised if you order like an elephant garlic or music and you only get a few cloves, because that is just the nature of that garlic, and every site should say it. Now let's talk about purchasing that garlic, because there are a few different options out there. If you are somebody who has never grown garlic, or maybe you don't have that big of a space and you would like to try growing it, the best option for you is to get individual bulbs. So somewhere like Botanical Interest or Seed Company, you can actually get individual bulbs. They will cost you more because you are now paying for the convenience of only having one. So that is the sort of trade-off here, is that it is more expensive, but you get a wider selection of varieties. And maybe if you don't have a massive space, or you're not an insane person like me who wants to grow 600 to 800 plants, this is a much more sensible way to do it. You could purchase the individual heads, and you could also experience up to, I think we have 12 different varieties on our site right now, which means that you could try 12 different types of garlic, figure out which one you like the most, and then next year you could double down on that. So it's a great way to try new varieties, but it's also a great way to get your foot in the door in growing garlic the first time. Now, if you are an insane person like myself, then you are going to want to buy your garlic by the pound. So over here, I think I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds of garlic, which is how I ended up with so many cloves, because you could have upwards of like 100 cloves per pound of garlic. So I got this from Keen Garlic. Now, this is the next important thing about purchasing garlic. This garlic from Botanical Interest comes from Fillory Farms. The one that I purchase in bulk by the pound is from Keen Garlic Farms. That is the key word here. They're both garlic farms, which means that they sell certified garlic seed. In order to sell garlic seed, it has to be tested for diseases to be certified that it's not going to transmit a fungal disease to your garden or to your farm. If you're buying it to actually grow and sell as a farmer, you don't want to transfer some crazy disease into your soil that could live for a decade or even just many years and ruin every future garlic crop. So that is the benefit of getting it from a garlic farm. You know what the varieties are, and you know it's certified disease-free. Now, if you wanted to go to the grocery store, buy some random garlic and plant that, you could do that. I would try to get an organic one, because they are probably all sprayed with some sort of growth inhibitor, and the organic one will have a less gnarly one, so it's more likely to actually grow for you. The difference is that while it is eating quality, and this is also eating quality of course too, it is not tested for disease, it's not certified for disease. What the farmers do is they buy a bunch of seed garlic from a certified safe place, plant all that, and then sell the bulbs. They're not propagating it for seed to grow their own seed year after year. They're just getting it in bulk from other companies. So yes, it can work. You might not know the varieties. It might not come up because it has a growth inhibitor, and it might have disease. So those are just the caveats. And I just wanted to explain that to you, because garlic is actually one of the most expensive seed that you could buy. And it's not really a seed. You're literally propagating a section of the plant and putting it in the ground to produce more of that plant. It's more akin to taking a cutting from like a tree than it is really planting a seed. So it is pricey, but I think it is worth it to have that peace of mind, to know that you're not bringing in some crazy disease. And of course, to just know the variety of garlic that you have, because that is the fun of it. Just like tomatoes, there is a whole world of varieties in the garlic. So I have music, I have, let's see, the varieties I have here are Enchelium Red, I have music, I have Georgian Fire, Chestnut Red, and I think that's it. I didn't go that crazy. I wanted to keep it simple and just get a lot of it. And in here I have a couple new ones to me. There's the Georgian Fire, Montana Zemo is one that I've heard good things about, Sicilian Artichoke is another one, Chestnut Red. So I have some amount of crossover here. Now the other thing I wanted to mention is, if you do have garlic seed that you've saved from the previous year, which is actually what this is the garlic that I grew in my garden this year, some of the bigger heads that I set aside. I'm saying bigger heads because you want to choose the biggest ones. The bigger the clove, the bigger the bulb that you'll get when you plant it. So this was all music, hardneck garlic that I grew here in my garden. And the only reason I haven't really created my own garlic seed is because I've never grown enough to feel like I actually am comfortable using this much to plant that much. Because if I planted 100 of my heads of garlic, then I would have 100 less, and I would have run out 2 months ago, and I would have been very sad. So this year I am actually setting aside, I only have 3 here, but I will propagate these. I will plant them in a raised bed separate from the rest, because I don't know if they have some disease. I don't want to keep propagating that disease year after year. So I'm going to plant them in a quarantine section. And the cool thing about planting your own garlic here is that garlic is a very quick to adapt plant, which means that if I plant this and I harvest it next year, it will become more adapted to the soil, to the weather, to the climate conditions in my region in San Diego. If I do that for like 5 to 6 years, this garlic will basically have fully adapted to my area, and I might not even need to keep it in the fridge anymore. But since this is the first year that I've harvested from my garden after I got it from the farm, I am going to be placing it in this paper bag, and I'm going to be putting it in the back of my crisper drawer so that it can vernalize, which is that trickery of trying to trick your garlic into thinking that winter actually happened and it is now ready to plant. One of the cool things about doing this in a warmer climate like San Diego is that if I take this garlic that I put in the fridge and then I plant it, I could normally harvest it within like 4 months or maybe 6 months. If I plant it out in November, I'm harvesting it in May. I don't have to wait till June, July like most people do. And I think it's just because I'm short-circuiting that first couple months of winter growth where most plants, if you're in a cold zone, they're kind of just hunkering down and hibernating. They're not actively growing. But here in San Diego, it's warm enough and mild enough that they will actually grow through the winter, which leads to an earlier harvest. So in general, most people will plant garlic 4 to 6 inches apart in a raised bed. Now, I think 6 is probably the safest distance that you could do, and you could do 6 inches in every single direction, side to side. You could do a diagonal offset in your bed planting, but 6-inch spacing is the general best rule of thumb for garlic to get a nice big bulb. So what that means is, here's the simple equation that I've simplified as much as I possibly can. Let's say you have a 4 by 8 foot bed. You take 4 times 8, and then you multiply it by 4, which is to denote that for every foot you're planting 2. And so we have 2 dimensions, it's 2 times 2, which is 4. Just trust me, it's length times width times 4. So 4 by 8 bed, we're looking at 128 heads of garlic that could be grown in that bed. If we have a 4 by 4, you have 16 times 4. So what is that? That's 64. That is the simple way to do your math. If you want to figure out how much space or how much garlic you need to order, let's say you're only planting that 4 by 8 bed, well, then you need 128 cloves, and that's all you need to figure out. So that is the simple way to figure out how much you need. Now, let me show you around the garden very quickly, and I'll tell you the plan that I have for where I'm going to grow it, how I'm going to plant it, and the different areas that I'm choosing. The first place I have in mind to plant my garlic is this 4 by 8 raised birdies bed. And with the math that we already covered, I know that I could fit 128 in this bed, which means that I still have to find space for another 400 to 500 cloves of garlic, which is a little bit daunting. So my plan here is to dig up these peppers, overwinter them in containers, and then entirely fill this with garlic. Now I did have a raised bed back here that's 3 by 6 where I planted some garlic last year, but it turns out in the winter time, that bed loses sun very early in the evening, and the garlic became stunted because it didn't have enough actual full sun in the winter time. And by the time spring came and it did get that sun, it was already stunted and it didn't produce very well. So that is another important thing to consider is, where is the sun in your garden at the time of planting? You don't want to put it somewhere that's going to be fully shaded out in the winter time when the soil is wet. That's going to lead to fungal diseases and rot. So take a look at your garden space a little bit beforehand. Last year, the majority of that homegrown garlic that I had actually came out of this one bed over here. And I believe they're on the order of 3 by 10 feet. So it's not gonna quite fit 128. It's gonna fit closer to under 100. Now this one on this side is slightly wider. It is 4 by 10. So that is 40 times 4, 160, which puts me halfway to my goal of how much garlic I want to plant, roughly 300 now. And that is the goal overall for this section of the garden. Now, a lot of these peppers are still producing quite nicely. And the reason why I'm not doing it in this bed, even though there's less plant in it, is because I already did it last year. I'm trying to practice rotations in my garden because I have had rust on my garlic before, which is a sort of minor fungal disease, but if it gets bad, it could totally stunt the growth of your plants. Originally, I had some idea of putting it in this bed, which is one of my largest beds by far. I believe it's on the order of like 10 by 10. So that would have been 400 cloves of garlic in here, which would have entirely solved my problem. But what I noticed is that my tomatoes started to look very sad and weak later in the season. I pulled one out and I found root knot nematode. So instead, what I've done is I've planted this entire area in a mustard cover crop. That's this guy right here. And what I'm going to do is, once this flowers, chop it up, till it into the very surface of the soil, and that will literally fumigate and kill off fungal diseases and root knot nematodes in my soil. But this is still about 6 weeks out from being fully complete, broken down, and plantable, and that is a little bit too late for my garlic. I don't want to keep it in the fridge for that long. I well, I want to only have it in there for about 4 weeks. So instead, I'm going to be planting this with my long haul brassicas like cauliflowers, but I have somewhere else in mind that should work out just fine. I've decided that what I'm going to do is actually plant my garlic in this gigantic no-till bed. I'm not entirely sure how big it is, but I'd say it's roughly 4 feet across and maybe 15 to 20 feet. So that should be enough to just put me over the edge of planting out all my garlic. There's also a little bit of space back here that gets a little bit more sun than that raised bed I showed you earlier. So that is the basic plan here. Before I plant the garlic, I will be loosening the soil, especially the in-ground beds, with a fork, because remember, this is a bulbing plant, so you want to give it nice loose-ish soil, not totally compacted soil. I'll be adding fertilizer at the time of planting, and I will also be covering it in compost and also mulch. Those 3 things should supercharge your garlic because you want to give it tons of fertility at the beginning of the growing season. That way it focuses on producing tons of green leaves, and those green leaves that come up are what gather all the energy to build that big bulb. So that's kind of all the basic information you need to know to get ready to plant all your garlic. This is almost even actually a little bit late because some places are already selling out of garlic. But if you haven't gotten your garlic yet, this is your chance to go out there, pick up what you need, and try growing it for the first time. It's a very rewarding plant to grow. It takes 4 to 6 months. You put it in the ground and you leave it. That is literally all you have to do. If you have hardneck garlic, you might have to remove the flower stalk in the springtime, but that's not even a problem because you get to eat that as well. So garlic is a wonderful thing. I hope you guys all try it out. It is so much fun to harvest and pull from the ground and get those big heads of garlic. But now what I'm going to do is put all of that garlic in the back of my refrigerator for as long as I can before I get in trouble for taking up too much space. So I'll see you guys later when we actually plant this garlic sometime by the end of October.